Welcome to Powerboat1.com. Today we're going to be changing the shift cable on this sweet little Miller Jet boat. We're going to start by removing the heim joint from the forward and reverse bucket, and then we'll pull the bulkhead nuts off so we can remove it from the actual nozzle assembly. After we get the seal nut removed from the transom assembly, we'll fish out the two split washers and the rubber grommet that seals the cable to the transom assembly. When we're changing the cable, we may put a little more length to it so we can pull it back to maybe go with the trim cable to get some of this bend out of it. You can see where it's broke here from years of being pushed up and underneath this swim step from the nozzle going up to its full trim position. When it's all the way down, it pulls it back far enough and we really don't have a problem with bending at that point. You can see to where the inner core has cracked and is now protruding through the plastic outer core. In time, this would get to where the inner core would actually push out of this area, and then it would be a cable failure and you wouldn't be able to even go forward or reverse in the boat. It would be locked in place. We're going to start with removing the nuts on the heim joint off of the forward and reverse bucket. Always make sure you loosen the nut on the heim before you pull it off of here. Let's get this off. We're going to set aside this heim joint because we're going to reuse it on the new cable when we do the installation. Now you're going to want to loosen up the bulkhead nut. A lot of times you'll have to remove this rubber grommet first so you can get the nut off. Then it's just a matter of pushing the cable up and out of the bracket. Now that we've got the cable removed from the bracket, we're going to need to remove the seal nut that goes into the transom assembly. Underneath the seal nut, there's going to be two split washers and a rubber grommet. After we get this out of there, we'll need to fish those out of there as well, because we'll need to install those onto the new cable at the same time. Actually, this one, they never installed the two split washers and the rubber grommet. So that's something that we'll install when we put the new cable in so we can actually get a good water seal. This may have been leaking in the boat over years, and the guy's been wondering where this leak's been coming from. Okay, now we're going to push the cable through the transom assembly and get it up inside of the boat. Well, be careful that the cable doesn't grab anything that's important as you're coming out of there. Now we'll pull it out and just set it aside until we get the front disconnected. On this Miller, we're going to need to remove the two screws that hold the side panel in place. We're going to have to take the seat out also so we can get into the shifter and the cable clamp that's held in place that's kind of wedged back in between here. Okay. I'm just going to reach in and pop out the seat bolts. Now with the seat out, you can see where the clamp bolts are. Let's get these screws out so we can push the panel back. Now we can get the panel pulled back. We can see that somebody used some 0.2 long screws in there. When we put it back together, we'll put something in that's a little more appropriate for this. Something that if you got to reach back there, you're not going to be cutting your hand on the thing. We'll take and we'll cut those down, or we'll get a shorter screw when we put it back together. They don't need to be a 4-inch screw to hold on a little clamp. We're going to have to take out this cotter key, pull back this little barrel clip, and then we'll pull the barrel clip off the cable because we need to retain that for later. Sometimes these cotter pins can fight you a little bit, so you've got to change tools a little, maybe use a pair of dikes to kind of wedge it out of there. There we go, victory. What'd I tell you about that being a long screw? Okay. There's the clamp. That retains the cable. That's always needed. This one's still in good shape, so we'll be able to reuse this. Now that we've got the cable clamp out, we got it all disconnected, we're going to take and we're going to pull the panel back and we'll pull the cable up out. I've already looked inside. There's nothing holding it. There's no zip ties. There's no clamps. There's nothing. So just a matter of pushing the panel back and pulling the cable out. We want to pull the barrel off because we're going to save that and put that on the other cable. When we put the new cable in, we'll do a readjustment so that we get the forward and reverse bucket where we want it to be. This piece is still in good shape too, so we'll be able to reuse them. Sometimes, after years of use, it'll actually wear the brass down in here, and this will get really thin to where it'll end up breaking on you. So that's when you'd want to make sure you put a new one of these barrel fittings on. Now let's pull the cable up out of here behind the panel. Make sure not to get into the upholstery and destroy anything. Let's give the cable a little pull because it is wrapped around some wires. We don't want to pull out any of those wires. There we go. Normally these cables have a part number and a measurement burned into the casing. This cable doesn't seem to have that on it for some reason, so we're going to have to resort to measuring the cable. We'll measure from end of cable to end of cable to get our actual measurement. As you can see with the tape pulled on it, we need a 16-foot cable. Okay, we got our cable here from Hard Marine. I like using Hard Marine cables because the diameter of the casing is the same size as the old Morris cables that Berkeley used. So all of the cable seals and all the attachments fit perfectly. Some of the other brands, they don't fit quite as well because they run a little smaller casing. Now here's the number we were looking for on that other cable, where I said most of them actually have this burned into it. It gives you the part number, and then the last two numbers of the part number is the actual length of the cable. These are coiled cables, so you want to be a little careful when you're undoing it because it's going to want to flip open with you. So you want to just kind of ease them out as you go so you don't scratch anything on the boat. To get this installed, we're going to want to pull off the bulkhead nuts and the washers so that we can get it actually pushed from the inside of the boat back through the transom assembly and out. Then we'll go back to the front, connect the front side up, and then we'll come back and connect this back up after we get it pushed through the transom assembly. You do have to pull off the nut and the rubber seals on these. We'll replace them later so that you can get the nuts off and the two washers. Another nice thing about Hardin is all stainless steel on these cables, so it's going to give you years of life. Okay, we're going to now take the cable. I'm going to find the hole. There it is, and we'll just push the cable up through and to the outside. Okay, now we're going to take and we're going to put the cable back up in the gunwale behind the panel and then reconnect everything back up front again, just like when we took it off. Pretty simple deal. We're going to take our barrel threading, we're going to thread it back onto the cable. The threads on these are always a 1/4 28 thread on these 43 series cables. The model 12JCs and 12JGs and 12JIs always will take a 43 BC series cable, while the 12JEs and 12JFs will take a 43 C series cable, which clamps on both ends and don't have that bulkhead like we have on this one. When we pulled this off, the adjustment was all the way down on it, so we're going to start right there for now and put it back together onto the shifter. Since you can't see behind the panel too well, what the clamp does is the clamp really goes around this groove and sets in, and then the screws will come through the panel and lock this in place. And when it's tight, just the cable will move back and forth and the casing won't move at all. So you can see I cut the screw down to a more manageable size. Got the screws through, got the clamp on, take and put the lock nuts back on it. Now we're going to tighten up the clamp. There we go, that's all nice and tight. This moves back and forth now. All's good. Now we're going to go back to the back and get that all connected up. Here's the two split washers and new cable grommet that we got from Berkeley Jet that we'll be able to install back into this that was missing so we can make a nice tight seal in the transom assembly. We're going to slide the cable grommet over the cable, which sometimes you've got to roll it up into place over this. This is the hardest part, is getting it over the stainless. Okay, we're on that. We'll slide this all the way around and up to the close to the end. Split washers, you just take, and that's why it's a split washer. Put one on one side of the grommet and flatten it again. The second one goes on the other side of the grommet. So basically it's going to look like this when you get ready to slide it down into the transom assembly. Split washer, grommet, and split washer. The nut comes down and pushes on this outer split washer. The inner split washer holds it all in place, and when you tighten it, it'll compress the grommet up against the cable, creating the seal. Now that our grommets are down in place, we'll take and we'll slide our nut down over, and the nut goes all the way back up, and then it'll thread in place into the transom assembly. Now that we've got our transom seal nut tightened up and sealed, we're just going to reverse some of this process that we did before taking it apart. Thread the nut up it. We'll slide it back down inside. We'll slide the nut up onto the cable, run it up. Take our water seal grommets. The large one, slide it up. The smaller one, slide it into place. We'll put our nut on, and then we'll thread our heim joint back in place. Push the cable up into reverse there. Then we'll take our retaining bolt. Need to go up a little bit more. Okay. Take and tighten our retaining bolt up. Tighten our lock nut down to secure that in place. Now before we tighten up our bulkhead nuts, we'll be able to run this up. You can see we're getting full open. You want to make sure on the bucket that it doesn't hang down or it'll grab the water. You want to make sure that the bucket goes up past this nozzle assembly when it's in forwards, and then when it drops down it closes all the way so that the reverser can actually work. Now we'll tighten these nuts up, and job is done. All in all, this is a pretty simple job to do. It should really take you under an hour to get it all done. A lot of it depends on what you have to do to get the cable in and out, but that's about an average time frame to do it. Pretty simple. Average backyard guy can do it. Grassroots guy can do this at home. So simple job. Thanks for watching Powerboat1.com. We're now heading to the lake.